Let's go ahead in idle create a new file.
This video is brought to you by OppiePie's Academy.
And I'll use this one to demonstrate outputting expressions with print. In the previous video, I did a very simple expression. We did something like 12 plus 5, and we saw that that outputs 17. But expressions can be a lot more complex. So we could say print, for example, 127 times 64 divided by 0.02 plus 185.99. So when we have an expression like this, the order of operations is used in order to determine what happens first. The order of operations is PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. You might have heard him described that way. But what that means is parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So everything is processed in this order. Multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. So in the example we have above here, we don't have any parentheses or exponents, but we do have multiplication. So first thing that would happen is 127 is multiplied by 64. Then the result of that would be divided by 0.02, and then whatever is left would be added to 185.99. If we did this with the parentheses, we'd get a very different result. Matter of fact, let's try that. Let's copy and paste this line. Obviously, we've got to get rid of this because we can't process these notes here. But let's say we take that line, we copy and paste. And this time, I'm going to add parentheses to make that middle operation happen first. Let's go ahead and save our Python document. And I'll save this as expressions.py. And now we can run this in our terminal. Need a new terminal window. And I'll make that bigger to make sure you can see it well. So our first terminal window here is running idle. So let's see, we're going to move to our desktop, and then our Python folder with the cd command stands for change directory. And there's expressions.py, so Python expressions. Then I'll use tab to autocomplete, and it says Python expressions.py. So here we get 17, and then the same result for the last two. Let me change this up a little bit. There we go. Let's say we do the addition first. Now we're going to get a slightly different result. All right, so let's save. So we've got our parentheses in there indicating what goes first. So now for the first one, we get this 406,585.99. That's for that expression. Second expression, 43.6965, etc. Now, it's important to understand in expressions, there are two different types of numbers that Python can deal with. The first type of numbers is whole numbers or integers. So 845 would be an integer. So if we have two integers, we're always going to get as a result an integer. If we have two floating point numbers, numbers with a decimal point, we're always going to get a floating point number. So let's run this again real quick, and we can see the result. So there we get 1690 for 845 times 2, and it's 1690. There's no point anything because we have two integers. With two floating point numbers, 125.05 plus 27.01, we still get a floating point number, even if we have a situation like this, 125.5 plus 0.5. So even if we have a number like this that would end in 0.0, it's still going to respect the fact that that's a floating point number and give us 126.0. Now, if we mix a floating point number and an integer, let's see what result we get. So here we have 125.0 plus 4. So even though it's 0.0, that's still considered a floating point number by Python. All right, so Python expressions.py, and we get 129.0 for the result. So if we get a floating point number if any of the numbers in our expression are a floating point number. If everything in our expression is an integer, then we'll get an integer as a result. So here you can see you can start creating some fairly interesting and complex expressions with the Python programming language.